most of you all know that Mr. Conway and I are business partners, and we're also cousins. So I will be recusing myself from any votes on this matter, and probably won't take part much in the discussions. Sometimes I do in these things, but we do have a hearing officer, so let the record reflect that. So with that said, I will turn the hearing on the appeal of denial of HRB COA 19-255 19-255 amended at 215 West Stephen Foster Avenue, Bill Conway, Pamima LLC. I'll turn this over to Audrey Hayden, who's our hearing officer and city attorney.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And I know that the parties are aware of this, but I just wanted to kind of go over a little bit of our schedule. Mr. Conway and Mr. Hamilton are going to present for about 20 minutes to start with, and then Ms. Jennings and Mr. Cole are going to present evidence for you for about 20 minutes after that, and then each party will have 10 minutes for rebuttal or questions, cross-examination, I suppose. And then after that, we'll open the floor for the council. So council members, if you're thinking of questions as you go, please just jot them down. We're going to try and, it's not going to be like an oral argument, I suppose, where you get interrupted as you go, hopefully. So if you'll save those till the end, I think it'll make things go a little more smoothly. And I wrote just a sort of brief procedural history for the council, because this is, a little bit different timing or circumstances, I guess, that this has come to you all. So I'm just going to kind of read through this to make sure we're all on the same page. And Thomas, you may cover this, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating something, but I just wanted to kind of put this so they understood the timing. Multiple certificates of appropriateness were submitted by Mr. Conway relating to the property at 215 West Stephen Foster, and were originally considered at the December 17th, 2019 Historic Review Board meeting. These COAs were tabled and then taken up again at the January 21st, 2020 meeting, and 10 COAs relating to that property were considered and approved at that meeting. Specifically, in the summary of recommendations of the COAs that were approved by the City Council at the January 28th, 2020 meeting, COA 19-255 stated, Bill Conway, applicant owner, requests to construct a 2-story addition and add windows at 215 West Stephen Foster Avenue. Recommendation, approval for the proposed windows with the following conditions. Conditions, the aluminum clad or wood windows are both approved, and the final design with any changes would be staff approved. Mr. Conway proceeded to install new windows on the addition and replaced the historic windows in the original portion of the home with new windows. A stop work order was issued by the city on April 23rd, 2020 on the basis that the new windows were approved for the addition only. Mr. Conway filed a lawsuit in Nelson County Circuit Court on December 16, 2020, seeking a ruling he was permitted to replace the windows in the original portion of the home. Subsequently, Mr. Conway brought an amended COA to the Historic Review Board on February 16, 2021, seeking to keep the windows as installed. The Historic Review Board denied that COA, and this matter is before you on appeal at Mr. Conway's request. So, Mr. Hamilton or Mr. Conway, I'm going to turn it over to you from there.
Thank you, Audrey. So good evening, everyone. My name is Thomas Hamilton, and I represent Bill Conway and Pamima LLC before you today in this matter, and also in the litigation in Nelson Circuit Court. First, I want to say I'm honored to represent Mr. Conway in this matter. He's a pillar of the community, upstanding citizen, spent his entire life working in the city and improving it both professionally and charitably. It's interesting today, not sure it's made its way fully public yet, but the Nelson County Bardstown Chamber of Commerce awarded Bill with its Lifetime Achievement Award today. So I think that just reflects his character, his personality, and it's important to remember when considering the matter that's here before you today. Our position in this matter is very simple. Bill filed or caused to be filed on his behalf a certificate of appropriateness for various renovations, restorations, and additions to the property located at 215 West Stephen Foster Avenue. And for those of you that may not be familiar, it's on the corner of West Stephen Foster and 5th Street, right next to the old Shelton's building. At the time that Bill purchased the property, it sat in a significant state of disrepair. It had significant foundational issues, and had been on the market for some time. Now, I think anybody that's familiar with the city will remember it had a for sale sign in front of it. It was years, as far as I'm aware. And I think I've been told that maybe some of the council members looked at it and passed on it due to its poor condition. So if you remember that property, it's important to consider Bill's project was to save the home, okay, to save this historic property, not to save a window or to save any particular aspect, but to save it as a whole. And that's going to be important a little bit when we come back around to that. As Audrey stated, the certificate of appropriateness filed by Bill was expansive. It included a request for the replacement of all windows. Okay, it's plainly in the plans. And then once Bill filed it with HRB, the HRB broke the application down into 10 separate applications. Okay, the HRB failed to delineate the request for new replacement windows in any of the 10 applications specifically. And the applications, I'll get back to those in a minute, but they were comprehensive, to say the least. As Audrey stated, there was an initial hearing in December 2019. However, the actual application that we're here on today was presented on January 21st, 2020. And that process was unique. First, a local resident, and I'm not sure that he resides in the city anymore, but David Hall, who was not a member of the HRB, he was not authorized by Bill Conway or any party to do what he did, but he showed up and sort of commandeered the hearing, okay? He derailed this, and really, I think most of the confusion in this matter can be laid directly at Mr. Hall's feet. I think it's almost completely his fault that we're here today. He showed up, Bill showed up with his architect and his builder in good faith with a set of the plans ready to discuss the entire project. Mr. Hall showed up with what he believed to be more appropriate plans. He trespassed on the property and showed up and commandeered the meeting from the start. Okay, broke the law by trespassing. He didn't have any authority to be there, so that's important. He ended up wasting the time of Bill and led to significant confusion, which I believe personally is why there's the confusion here as to whether or not the windows were approved. But after getting Mr. Hall to move on and finally get out of the way, the HRB approved all 10 of Bill's certificate of appropriateness applications. So to go through them, COA 19-254 approved the construction of the addition, which if you go a little bit further down Fifth Street, you can see the addition. It's a beautiful structure, certainly much more appealing on the eyes than the old decayed building that we're hoping to restore. COA 19-255 approved the addition of windows, and that's the one we're here on today. COA 19-256 approved some repairs and addition of a foundation. The back portion of the property didn't even have a foundation, so it had to be demolished, and so we had to do significant foundational repairs. COA 19-257 approved the hardy board. COA 19-258 approved the shingle roof. COA 19-259 approved the exterior paint, which included the trim. COA 19-260 approved the exterior doors, which were changed. COA 19-261 approved the addition of the porch. COA 19-262 approved the gutter work they were doing. And COA 19-263 approved the exterior lighting. So I go through these to illustrate that this wasn't a project where Bill was going up and said, I'd like to put windows in this property, in the addition, and that's the end of it. No, this was a significant certificate of appropriateness that a bill applied for, it almost changed the entire, every aspect of the exterior of the home needed work and was addressed. So, like I said, Bill presented the project to the city as a comprehensive plan. The plans, we believe, were submitted on PDF to the city. And I know part of the HRB's argument is that the plans submitted by Bill were too small to read the writing that addressed the replacement of the historic, or what are considered by the HRB to be historic windows. So first of all, we believe we submitted these in PDF form, which is easy enough to manipulate so that you can see any writing. But either way, at the hearing itself, Bill and Wadia and Dave Cook brought full-size plans, actual full-size legal plans. And I tried to email all the council the audio recording, and it doesn't look like it went through. I guess the audio was too large to email. But if you listen to the audio recording, you can frequently see or hear papers being shuffled throughout the course of the very long hearing. And that is from the HRB board members and Bill and everyone reviewing and flipping through these plans. So these were available, and we believe that the copies submitted to the HRB were fully legible and ready for review. So just to reiterate, Bill provided everything in a clear, concise format. Okay, and also it's also our opinion that the Historical Review Board, the R stands for review. So if the board feels, or if any member of the board felt that they were unable to accurately read the plans, then it's our position that it's incumbent upon the review board to request that the applicant provide plans that are legible. And no request was ever made by Bill, and that's because they were legible and were available. So after approval of the project as a whole, Bill received a certificate of appropriateness dated January 28th, 2020 from the Bardstown City Clerk, which stated, and this is a quote, "Work approved. Approval to install the proposed windows with the following conditions. The aluminum clad or wood windows are both approved, and the final design with any changes would be staff approved." And period. And that's the end of the quote. Following the receipt of this COA, Bill proceeded with the project. He first shored up the foundation and then ordered the custom windows. Okay, after he received the custom windows, he installed them as permitted. All right, after he installed them on April 23rd, 2020, Bill received a stop work order from the city. The stop work order alleged that Bill had replaced the old windows without approval. And from the date of that letter until the present, Bill has attempted to negotiate this matter with the city and with the HRB to remediate the issue. Okay. Bill has met twice with Rashay Jennings, the HRB director, and also I believe Audrey may have been present at some of those meetings, to try to resolve it, and with no success. Okay. The response of the HRB has consistently been remove the new windows and replace the old decrepit windows immediately, or you're not going to be able to proceed with your project. Bill has suggested a number of remedies. First, he proposed that the HRB or the city investigate whether any grants or funding are available for historical structures which would help remediate this issue. Okay. Number two, he offered to sponsor a workshop wherein some of the windows could potentially be repaired, and people interested could learn a trade. We'll get to this in a little bit, but one of the issues in repairing these old windows is finding people willing and able to do the work. Okay. We'll talk about this in a minute, but some of the estimates Bill has received are significantly more costly than replacement. I mean, several times, 4 or 5 times the cost per window. And the time frame is months or years by the time people can get to this. So this will be important in a minute. He offered to allow the HRB to inspect the old windows. This is earlier in the process in April. And now fair enough to the HRB refused to do it due to COVID, which, I mean, I guess is reasonable, but we wanted them to look and see how poor they were and why they needed to be replaced. And the HRB wasn't willing to do it at that time. And then we also have offered to donate the windows. We still have the historic windows, and we'd offer to donate them to a historic cause, something like Anatoc that doesn't have windows, that could use some historic windows from a similar time frame. So Bill has consistently and frequently attempted to negotiate this matter with the city. Also, Bill contacted the Kentucky Heritage Council and offered to sponsor a similar workshop to try to get local contractors together to teach a trade, to try to inform people on how to do these things, and wasn't taken up on this request. That last suggestion was made by Patrick Kennedy, who it's our understanding, we've seen a report that he's provided to the HRB. He's a supposed expert in historic preservation, and Mr. Kennedy was initially retained by Bill to look at the matter, and later retained by the city in this matter. And he said in an email to Bill, this is a quote from Mr. Kennedy, "You acted in good faith. You followed the guidelines and procedures required by the city of Bardstown. You hired an architect with a historic preservation background," although that's inaccurate, but this is his quote. "You received approval of the plans from the city of Bardstown. You were in compliance with the approved plans when you replaced the windows." Okay, so this is the view of an independent third party, Patrick Kennedy, on his initial review of the windows, is that Bill was fully authorized to do it and moved forward in good faith and did what he should have done. So all the remedies that Bill offered and continued to try to get would allow him to continue with the project and helped the historical preservation of the city. Okay, that's important because Bill respects the HRB. We believe there, and I believe it personally as well, that the work that they do is important. But after months of essentially negotiating against himself, Bill had no other recourse to file suit against the HRB for its illegal and improper action in issuing that stop work order. So we're here today hoping the city council will use common sense and recognize the windows were approved and that Bill acted in good faith in doing so. We believe that any reasonable person that received the certificate of appropriateness that Bill received that said windows are allowed to be replaced would have moved forward in the same exact manner. Okay. Rashay and the HRB do have very difficult jobs, and we understand and respect that. They have to suffer through historic preservation zealots like David Hall and the like, breathing down their neck, looking over their shoulders, criticizing everything they do. And alternatively, there's people who think the government shouldn't be able to tell me what to do with my property. I should be able to do whatever it is that I like, regardless. And Bill is in neither of these categories. He's a citizen. He's taken on a project that will benefit this community and restore a historic home that has fallen into disrepair. Had Bill not stepped up and taken on this project, it's probable, in my opinion, that the city would be saddled with another Anatoc. Okay, that property sat there for years and years and just deteriorated and deteriorated. So what Bill's taken on here is a project to save a historic home. Another thing to consider, and really what I believe we're here today to consider, is the January 2020 HRB hearing and whether that was approved. Bill came back in good faith in February 2021, hoping that the HRB would recognize its error, approve everything, and then remove the stop work order. personally, I would have advised Bill not to have gone in front of the HRB, and that's because I think it was a waste of his time, because I think he already had approval to do the work he did. But he's trying to act in good faith. And so in February 2020, we had the second HRB meeting, or the third, but the second one of any substance. And there were members of the HRB there that made comments that they were uncomfortable making a decision on this matter, and they thought the ultimate determination should be made by the city council. So my involvement in this started following the February 2021 HRB hearing. I got up to speed, so to speak, on this. Bill's initial counsel was Attorney Joe Ballard, who is now one of our 2 sitting circuit judges, and he reviewed this matter. He agreed with Bill's position that I agree with, that we maintain, that Bill had authority to do it, and that the city did not, or the HRB did not, granted his request, and then that the issue of the stop work order is improper. So that's a sitting judge. Now, he won't be able to judge this case, but I do think it's important to note that a sitting judge believes that the HRB granted approval on this. And before I took over, Joe Ballard received a letter from City's council indicating that some of the HRB or some of the city councilmen believe that Bill acted in less than good faith in this matter. It said something along the lines of, it's the city's position that Mr. Conway knew he shouldn't replace the windows, and the contractor, Dave Cook, made a statement that along the lines of, we kept the old windows because we knew we shouldn't have replaced them in case we got caught or something along those lines. However, nothing could be farther from the truth. This is, anybody that repeats that is either misrepresenting intentionally or unintentionally what Mr. Cook said. What Mr. Cook said, and I've got him here to testify to that if it's needed, is that they kept the historic windows in case they needed to use some of the parts that weren't decrepit. Any contractor is not going to waste a full item if a portion of it can be reused, and to save money for the client and save time in case they need to order things. There's also been some comments by both the HRB and some others that they're trying to blame Wadia Newman, who is the design consultant on this project. And to me, we couldn't disagree stronger with that statement. Wadia is a design consultant. She's a licensed architect from California. She's done work for me personally. She is a professional. She is incredibly talented. But what she is not is a historic preservation architect. So Wadia's job is to assist the client in achieving the client's goals in the plans. And so what Wadia did was to draw the project that would most preserve the house to the extent that it could be preserved, and allow it to be used for Bill's intended use, which is an Airbnb. Okay. Had Bill instructed Wadia to draw a geodesic dome, I would imagine that Wadia would have to do it if that's what she's retained to do. And then if we submit a geodesic dome to the HRB, in my opinion, the HRB is the one that's responsible for reviewing that. So we disagree strongly that Wadia has any fault in this matter, and she's here tonight to discuss her role if anyone has any questions for her.
I don't want to, you're right at your time. I'll give you a couple minutes to wrap up.
I got about another paragraph. And
I hated to interrupt that because I thought you were close. Okay.
I'm really close. I told
Sure, go ahead.
Charlie I'd be real quick, and I guess I lied. So if the city finds in favor of Mr. Conway today, it's our position that that would close this matter. If we receive approval, I'm authorized to represent to the city council that Mr. Conway will dismiss his case against the city. That'll be the end of it. and there won't be any further litigation. We'll move forward, and everyone will go away happy if we're allowed to keep the windows and move forward with the project. However, if the council denies this request today, I do want to state what we believe our case is. Bill was going to have this property on Airbnb. He was going to list it for $500 a night, and we believe conservatively it would have been full 10 nights a month. Okay, so we believe his lost income to be at a minimum $5,000 a month. And we believe that had the city not issued the stop work order in April, we would have been done with construction in August. So every month that continues, we believe his damages increase. Okay. Additionally, Bill has will suffer from increased construction costs. Everyone here is aware of the significant increase in the price of lumber and labor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We believe that if we're ultimately successful in our lawsuit, that we would be entitled to recover those damages. And then additionally, the repair of those windows is going to be time consuming and very expensive. So any costs that we incur related to that, if we're able to prevail in our lawsuit, certainly we will intend to seek those from the city. So this is a very conservative estimate. I don't believe I'm out of line on these, and it will continue to grow as time progresses. So Bill's agreement to do away with this is actually against my advice. I think he's got a strong case, and it's worth pursuing. But he wants to be done with this. He wants to be agreeable, and he wants the matter closed. So this is an important. And additionally, it's my understanding the city's privately paying for counsel on this. So in addition to any damages that we may receive, the city would also be forced to expend significant amounts on its own representation. So we are here today in good faith. We want to close this matter. Bill wants this matter put behind him. He wants to move forward with this project. We request the city recognize the HRB initially approved the windows, that Bill acted in good faith, and allow us to move forward with this project. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Cole and to Ms. Jennings.
Thank you, Thomas. Rashay or
Okay.
Charlie?
I guess,
There you
Charlie,
are.
are you
Okay.
okay with me going first?
Yes.
So what we're asking you to consider tonight is to uphold the HRB's decision to not allow the windows that were installed by Mr. Conway to be kept, and to ask that the original windows be repaired and reinstalled on the original structure. I'm citing several reasons why we're asking you to uphold this decision. The Historic Review Board follows federal standards for preservation, and we have local guidelines for preservation as well. So I'm going to begin with our local HRB guidelines and what they call for, which is Exhibit Q. Number 1, retain historic windows. Number 2, repair historic windows using materials that match the original. Number 3, historic windows on primary elevations, the front and the side, must be preserved. Number 6, do not use replacement sashes that do not fit historic window openings. Original openings should never be blocked to accommodate stock windows. And number 9, do not replace multi-pane windows that have been true divided lights with thermal glazing windows that have false snap-in or applied buttons on any facade elevations. The windows that were chosen to replace the historic windows do not fit the original opening, and the sashes are smaller than the original. Be at 143.15. The windows do have applied buttons. They are simulated divided lights versus true divided lights, and they are on a facade elevation. As you can see, we're in violation of several of the regulations regarding the windows. To even further clarify the importance of the original windows, please look at Exhibit R, which is the preservation standards from the Secretary of the Interior for historic windows. What is recommended is identifying, retaining, and preserving windows and their function that are important to the overall historic character of the building. What is not recommended is altering windows, or if the windows have features which are important in defining the historic character of the building. If these are removed as a result, the character is diminished from the building. By removing the windows, The character has been severely diminished by allowing the original windows on the very front and the side to be removed. If you look at Exhibit S, this is another federal standard, and this is preservation brief number 9. I'm going to demonstrate that the windows are significant by these federal standards. The preservation bulletin states that windows should be considered significant to the building if they are, number 1, if they are original. These windows are. If they reflect the original design or intent for the building, which these windows do. If they reflect regional styles or building practices, they reflect the Bardstown, Nelson County regional area. Reflect changes in the building in different time periods. They reflect the time period in which they were built, and are examples of exceptional craftsmanship and design, of which you can see and read in Patrick Kennedy's report. So this proves without a doubt that the windows are definitely important and considered significant by both local and federal standards. Patrick Kennedy evaluated Mr. Conway's windows on March 23rd. He is a restoration expert and is retired from the Kentucky Heritage Council. He has restored windows at Mount Vernon, which is George Washington's home. According to Mr. Kennedy's evaluation of the windows in Exhibit V, he states that they are in fair condition and can be repaired. The cost of the window repair to be $400 to $600 per sash, and it will take around 10 to 20 hours per window sash. Based on federal guidelines, Mr. Kennedy's recommendations states that the windows should have been repaired and retained. Mr. Conway very likely could have paid more to have the windows replaced than it would have cost to have them repaired. The cost is also something the HRB board cannot consider. They have to consider what's most appropriate for the historic structure itself. There is a market where the windows have been installed by Mr. Conway can be resold. Money can be recuperated from them. I feel the need also to address why the current windows cannot be kept as in-kind replacements. An in-kind replacement means that the windows have to be built to exact specifications of what was there. These windows were installed on the original structure are not exact replicas. This is noted in Exhibit W in February 2021 audio at 2/19/21 that the windows are not in kind and they're not the same size. Because of this reason, I cannot recommend that the windows that they have replaced on the original structure be kept. The difference between historic windows and new construction windows is that with historic windows, the whole basic idea is, according to federal guidelines and our local guidelines, to retain those historic windows. They are supposed to be repaired and they're supposed to be maintained because that's an integral portion of what keeps the property historic, is keeping those specific type of elements with the structure. This is about maintaining the entire structure as a whole to preserve it. One of the most common requests to HRB and to the board is to replace historic windows. And this is almost always denied. And the windows are replaced with but if they are replaced, they're replaced with exact replicas of the window that was there originally. HRB has held many to these standards since the 1980s. We've made many other applicants when the windows were deteriorated beyond repair to replicate those windows exactly and not replace them with simulated divided lights. I'm sure you all are aware of cases where this recently occurred, such as Demers here. They just need to be repaired and reinstalled. Mr. Conway has presented, and his attorney, of course, have presented several pieces of evidence that he believes demonstrates that he received approval to replace all the windows on the building. I completely disagree with this statement. My evidence will support and illustrate that there is no way that Mr. Conway at any point could have ignored so many different separate pieces of evidence that state that the windows were supposed to only be installed for the addition. Please turn to Exhibit K. This features the original application, and I'll give you guys a moment to be able to pull that up. I had met with Mr. Conway and Ms. Newman in my office about the project. We discussed having the historic windows replaced and how extremely difficult that would be, and it's rarely allowed to happen. From that discussion, I then created this application, which you see here. On the application, if you look at the application summary, it states the following: the applicant wishes to install new windows on the addition. The windows will be simulated divided light windows that are double hung. The applicant is proposing wood windows or that are aluminum clad windows for the new addition. In the review finding, it states the following will be discussed: the new windows proposed for the new addition. And it also states in the motion of what was actually approved. the motion to recommend approval of 19-255. The motion is based on the findings that the new construction is consistent with the new construction standards set forth in Section 5 of the Bardstown Historic Design Review Manual. If we're talking about original windows, we would have had to have stated that, and it would have been for the original building. So that would have to be in window standards in Section 4. This clearly demonstrates that what was approved was only for the addition and for the windows to be installed, not for the original portion of the building. Every time that a meeting occurs and an application is forwarded to the applicant, and there's also a meeting letter that's included with that. The meeting letter includes the date and time of the meeting, along with instructions about how that meeting is going to proceed. And I ask that you pull out Exhibit M or Exhibit G. Exhibit M is December's meeting letter, and Exhibit G is January's meeting letter. If you read there, it states, then actually voted on in January of 2020. For 2 months, I was not corrected. There should be any changes to this application. Now let's look at the agenda, which I also sent you in the meeting letter and the application when someone applies. If you look at Exhibit N, which is January's agenda, and you look at Exhibit U, which is December's agenda, you will see the following. COA 19-255, Bill Conway, applicant owner, requests to construct a 2-story addition and add windows at 215 West Stephen Foster Avenue. Again, nothing here states anything about the original structure, and the council is very aware of how I also phrased this about adding anything to a new addition or new construction. This was also sent to Mr. Conway for 2 months with no corrections made. If you review the certificate of appropriateness, Exhibit L, it states that the work is approved to install the proposed windows with the following conditions. The conditions were as stated. The certificate is actually based on, as in proposed in the application. And that is the application that I wrote, stating that everything you heard earlier, that the windows were only for the addition. To even further verify this, if you look at Exhibit I, December's HRB meeting minutes, and Exhibit H, January's meeting minutes, also verifies that we never mentioned the original windows in either meeting for 2 months. I would also like to point out to you, if you view the audio Exhibit P of January 21, 2020, on 2 separate instances, the chairman of our board refers to the windows being only for the addition. This occurs at 121:55 and 122:46. This means that the windows were being considered only for the addition and not at all for the original structure. Mr. Conway and Mr. Cook were present for this meeting, so they heard this with their own ears, and they never corrected the HRB board. If they wanted the original windows replaced, they should have stated that during the meetings or corrected my board. This never occurred during both meetings. Mr. Conway will suggest to you, because his application had a legible small font that states that he wanted to replace all windows, that he should be allowed to do so. HRB and I disagree with this statement. We were given larger plans of the house, but I was emailed the scan of the plans with the dimensions and the writing on them stating that the applicant wanted to replace all windows, which was not decipherable. During the February 21 meeting minutes, Exhibit W, Chairman Barkley stated that the plans were not legible and the board could not read a single word on the plans that were scanned and given to HRB. Mr. Ballard stated if there is an issue of visibility with the plans, that should have been mentioned by the board, and I come in and state that that was in fact mentioned during that meeting. I stated during the meeting that verbally everything had to be discussed, including Mr. Cook giving the original dimensions of the siding and the new siding dimensions so that we could make sure that they matched. We all told Mr. Cook we could not read the lettering on the plans, and he stated he would give us the details and explain it. The HRB board did talk about how they could not read the dimensions or anything on the plans in question, and they asked that the details of the project be verbally told to them so that they could confirm it. So as you see, I'm a little concerned about how all of this information can be overlooked when so many separate examples have been sent to the applicant regarding the exhibit, and they were for the addition. I also ask that you look at Exhibit T, which is an invoice for the windows that were purchased. The windows were purchased on 2 separate orders. If you listen to Exhibit W in February 2021 meeting minutes at 1:36:42, Mr. Cook admits to installing 2 bottom windows and then 2 to 3 weeks later to installing the rest of the windows. So can you please listen to this audio with me?
When I got the windows in, I put 2 in on the district side at the bottom, and we waited
Why were the windows not ordered all at once if the applicant was so certain that all the windows could be replaced? They mentioned several times during the meeting that they left the windows in for several weeks and wondered why no one had said anything. Why those two specific windows exactly, and why were they installed at those precise locations? Why we did not cite the applicant sooner was because we were shut down due to COVID, and a lot of us, including myself and my code enforcement officer, were working from home or not working at all. If they had any concerns or questions regarding whether or not the windows should have been replaced, I was only a phone call away. Also, why would the windows that were removed be kept in the first place if they were certain they had permission to replace the original windows? Justification was given by Mr. Cook, stating that he didn't have a dumpster or he went to another job. But if they were 100% certain that the windows were not supposed to be replaced, why was there any hesitation? Why? And the windows would have been destroyed immediately if they were so confident in their own decision. Please listen to the audio from the recording that I'm going to present right now.
You held on to these windows. What was the reason for holding on to these windows as opposed to discarding them?
Some of the reasons, maybe it's been at a time or dumpster thrown in there at the time.
Okay.
December and March, it was a lot of rain and stuff.
Why would Mr. Cook want to keep the windows out of the rain if they were going to be disposed of? To reiterate just a few of the facts, the HRB board had no reason to think anything would occur with the original windows because nothing was ever discussed about them. The cost to repair the windows very well could be less than what was spent to replace them. During either of the two meetings, the original windows was never mentioned. The windows are in fair condition and can be easily repaired according to Patrick Kennedy. The windows that have been installed cannot be kept as in-kind replacements because of our regulations, and we have made other applicants replace with exact replicas of the same windows. Replacing the windows are the most requested COA application, and allowing Mr. Conway to keep his windows will set a bad precedent that would be unfair to all the other people of the historic district who have to keep their historic windows and repair them. The HRB board doesn't make decisions that are arbitrary and capricious. Our decisions are based on federal standards that we have to follow. We ask the council to consider the ramifications if the windows that have been installed are allowed to remain, and it will significantly impact the overall integrity of the structure, and that is something that HRB and I are tasked to preserve. We simply ask that the original windows be repaired and reinstalled. Mr. Conway stated that he is trying to save a 200-year-old building, and in fact, so am I. I'm referencing the integrity of the building, what I'm also trying to save. And I argue adamantly that saving the building and its historic integrity include keeping the original 1800 windows as an integral part of saving the structure as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jennings. Mr. Hamilton?
I believe, is Charlie, are you going to speak now or are you going to wait till the closing statements?
Well, I think it's the way we have it, I think calendared is it was sort of 10 minutes of rebuttal for,
Okay.
unless I'm confused, Charlie. Rashay does have 5 minutes left though, if you want to add anything.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, guys. So I'm just in rebuttal. Largely, we of course disagree with the position of the HRB. First, the reason that, and Dave's here, and I can maybe have him state himself what the reason they didn't throw away the windows, but the primary reason is he just hadn't gotten around to it. We were going to maybe try and get a couple pieces that could be salvaged, and we're going to throw the rest of them in the trash can and take them to the dump. And you know, we certainly wish we had done so now, so we wouldn't be here on this, but we didn't. But I think the main thing is we submitted plans that included replacement of the windows. Now, the HRB is supposed to review the applications, and the certificate of appropriateness references the application, okay? And the application included the plans, which if you look at the original application, had about 8 pages of plans. Wadia may be able to state briefly, Wadia, are you on here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, Wadia, you had mentioned to me when we discussed this yesterday about how you only had a few things on these plans to illustrate the important, what was important and, the most important factors in this project. And could you state that for the council so they understand what was submitted and whether it was clear or not in the plans that the windows, the historic windows or the old windows were going to be replaced?
Yes. I had all 4 elevations drawn, and on the elevations, there were a total of 11 notes. And on the side elevation that had the note about replacing the windows, that had 8 notes on it. I've learned over 25 years of working in the Kentucky area and also my career in Arizona and California that you keep it simple, that you only put on the drawings what is most important. Knowing that this was going in front of the review committee, I only put notes that mattered. And of the notes that were on the side elevation, of the 8 notes, 5 of those stated match. Match the stone, match the siding, match the trim. Then there were 3 notes on the front. And those 3 said replace or repair. The biggest note on the top was replace all existing windows, remove existing storm windows, and repair or replace trim. All right, now that is about as simple as it gets. There were 3 notes on the front. So I was telling Thomas, if you're reviewing this, you could not miss this. This was as simple as it gets.
And Wadia, let me stop you real quick.
Go ahead.
Were you present at the January 2020 meeting?
Correct.
Okay, and was it your impression, did you believe that during the course of the meeting that replacing the windows was addressed?
Well, I mean, the information was on the drawings. So regardless of what was said, the fact is you couldn't miss it.
Do you believe
So,
that? Do you
You
believe
absolutely had to figure they read that, and they didn't have a problem with it.
Was it your impression that the HRB had approved the historic windows be replaced?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, Wadia, I'm going to let Dave Cook talk real quick so he can say it in his own words. So I'm going to turn my computer around. And so, Dave, will you just tell the council whether or not you believed you could replace the historic windows?
Those windows was damaged too much. You might find a part or 2 you could use, but we didn't get around to throwing them away. But then after I got the work stop order, I didn't want to throw them away because of just right here, litigation or anything else. Probably should have thrown them away.
Let me ask you this: did you believe? Were you at the meeting on in January of 2020?
Yes.
And did you believe that following that meeting that you all had authority or approval to replace the historic windows?
Yes.
Okay. And why did you replace 2 windows initially?
We got, I think it was 10 windows on the front. So we came in and my work schedule, we went and replaced 2. So we come back like several days later, replace the rest of them. So my question was to Rashay. I said, Rashay, if you had a problem, why didn't you say something about the first 2 windows?
Mm-hmm.
The stickers are still on. That was took off, but you never said anything till I got all of them in. And I felt like you changed your mind, even what y'all approved. That was my words to her.
Anything else you'd like to say?
When I question, I give them a detailed size of the windows, which they approved. Now I did go on the outside and add a seal to the new windows so they would look more like the older windows, because you got that, the new ones don't have a seal on it, stick out. So I did add that on there. So when they say the size is not there, if they'll add that the seal I put on, they'll find out they're extremely close.
And Dave, you frequently do work in the historic district. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Mhm.
And this project, is it? Would you agree that the project condition of this property when you all started work?
When I first started on, it was about to fall down. We done several $1,000s worth of interior to the basement walls that was falling in. You know, before we even started that, we had to shore it back up.
Okay. So if Bill hadn't taken this on, this property could have collapsed.
Oh, it was almost ready to collapse.
Okay. Thanks. All right, guys. So I think I'm about out of time, but again, I think it's our position that everything's post January 2020 is irrelevant to this matter. The only thing that's relevant is that we submitted an application with the relevant plans included. Those plans were approved. The project was approved, and we proceeded with authority. And we want to get this over, get it ratified, and finalized tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. You have 2.5 minutes if you have anything else to add, but if not, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cole or Ms. Jennings. Okay, thank you.
All right, this is Charlie Cole. I want to introduce myself to the council members that don't know me. I have been retained to represent the city and the historic board in the lawsuit that was filed by Mr. Conway about the very issue that's in front of you today. In my opinion, Mr. Conway jumped the gun because his lawsuit was filed before this issue had even become to the city council. And now we are before the city council. And from the statements made by Mr. Conway's attorney, it appears that Mr. Conway is trying to now use this lawsuit for leverage. I want to start, though, to give you some history. There's been some history given by Audrey at the beginning. There's history with Mr. Conway, which some of you may or may not know. And that is that Mr. Conway was a resident in the historic district, and he is very familiar with the rules and regulations for the historic district. He should be aware, like Riche said, that replacement of windows is the most common request and it's the most routinely denied. You've been given a package of exhibits, and you'll see there at Exhibit J, there are 2 applications that Mr. Conway filed in 2001, then 12 years later in 2013, and then the numerous applications that are before you today, at least one of them. So he's familiar with the system, and these applications to the Historic Review Board, they don't happen in a vacuum. You've heard Riche said that she met with Mr. Conway and met with his design consultant. And I will remind the board that the design consultant is not an expert in windows, neither is Mr. Cook. I think both sides are recognizing Mr. Kennedy as an expert, and there is a letter from Mr. Kennedy in your packet. And Riche, it includes the cost of replacing these windows. But in this meeting that was held between Riche and the design consultant and Mr. Conway, it was advised to each of them that replacement of the windows in the historic district is the rare exception, or words to those effect. And again, you've heard that's the most common request and most commonly denied. There's been discussion as to plans. I'd call them drawings, but in any event, those are 2 foot by 3 foot wide, 24 by 36 inches, but they were provided by email in a PDF. And so those dimensions were not readable to Ms. Jennings or the board. And in fact, at the hearing on the applications, Riche made a particular statement that you need to orally present all the dimensions to the board because we could not read those. And so those had to be presented orally to the board. She could also similarly not read the notes. If you can't read the dimensions, you can't read the notes. Then Riche had mentioned application number K, and you're going to hear me revisit some of the same documents. This application K is the application that was drawn up. And again, it reads, the applicant wishes to install new windows on the addition. There is no mention of the historic structure. And there are mention, if you look through that exhibit, of new construction. Second page at the very top reads new construction. And so new construction is what we're talking about, not the historic windows, the W codes that Rashay has discussed. Those W codes, she went through them at exhibit K. Exhibit Q, if you want to look at those. Also, there's been no quote given by Mr. Conway. And again, there has been a quote given, and it's shown that this will be feasible and possible to replace these windows, and they have been saved. And that's some of the most telling evidence is the audio that we listened to. But one of the other most telling pieces of evidence is the letter that was sent to Mr. Conway. I just read the application. It says the applicant wishes to install new windows on the addition. On exhibit M, a letter, there's two of them that were sent, but the first one sent on December 13th of 2019 provided Mr. Conway with this application that said windows on the new addition. And he was given a letter that said, when he's given that application, with this letter, you will find a copy of your COA application and a copy of the agenda for the meeting. Next sentence, this is in paragraph 3. Please let me know if there are any corrections or changes to your applications as soon as possible. That is December 13th, 2019. 60 days elapsed before the hearing on these applications, and there was no request for a correction, no request for any changes. And we know that this went before the board, and there was no discussions about replacement of the windows on the historic structure. Indeed, the application that was discussed talked about only the new addition. Now, we've heard from Mr. Kirk and we've heard from the design consultant, but we have audio proof of what was said at those hearings. And I think it's important enough that we play it one more time. First, Mr. Cook.
When I got the windows in, I put 2 in on the district side at the bottom, and we waited about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to install the rest of them. And but anything said about the first 2 that we put in.
So I think this along with the letter is the most telling evidence you have before you, in my opinion. 2 windows, only 2 were put in, and 2 separate invoices that ordered these windows, and waiting 2 to 3 weeks, which Mr. Cook has already said, we left the stickers on. So if someone saw it, they would know. So there was a deliberate wait of 2 to 3 weeks, putting only 2 windows in. The puzzle pieces don't fit together. They don't fit together. And what further makes the puzzle not fit together is the second statement by Mr. Cook.
You held on to these windows. What was the reason for holding on to these windows as opposed to discarding them? Okay.
And so there was a discussion about Mr. Ballard, now Judge Ballard. And what I think is significant, these statements by Mr. Cook were not elicited by questions from the board or questions by Audrey or questions by anyone else present, except for Mr. Conway's attorney. Mr. Ballard made these questions and Mr. Conway's contractor made these statements. So again, the puzzle pieces don't fit together. But on closer reflection, I would ask that the council see maybe those puzzle pieces do fit together. And what they may show, you can come to your own conclusion. This was something that was snuck into the application. It was not addressed by the board. The board has now addressed it, and they have said the windows must be replaced. And Rashay is here today on behalf of the board, asking you to affirm that decision of the board that the windows be replaced.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
I'll use my last 2 minutes to address some of the things that were just said.
Well,
I just want to respond real quickly because look, I find it insulting, the position that was just presented by counsel there. Bill Conway has never done anything remotely similar to what they're suggesting in his life. This is a person who literally today received the Lifetime Achievement Award. So if you want to say, well, he was mistaken, I can understand that. You know, oh, well, he moved forward under the mistaken assumption. But to suggest that this was sort of some grand scheme that we tried to concoct to fool the HRB to save some money on these windows is insulting. And I hope the council ignores it. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
all right. Thank you, Thomas. Do we have any, I'm sure the council members have some questions. So I'm not sure what the best way, since we're not all in the same room, is to kind of open it up for questions. But I guess I'll let you all unmute yourselves and identify so that Gary and Lisa can try and get it down more clearly. Identify yourself as you're asking a question, and we'll hopefully see how that goes.
This is Joe Buckman. If I could, I do have a couple of things, if you don't mind. First thing, I guess I really need to comment on Bill, and I just, he needs to be commended for even considering this project to start with. There was no question that this property had and still does have lots of issues, but and those issues were both structurally and aesthetically, as we all know. But there is no question that that house needed attention, and it needed it soon. And thanks so much for starting on that. I really, you can't imagine how much I appreciate that. Just a couple of things, if you don't mind. If I do remember Mr. Hall being at that meeting. I can recollect that. I was at that first meeting. I think I've been at every meeting that's been involved here except for the private meetings. And I kind of remembered a lot of the things there, but I don't remember it enough to quote anybody on that. But first thing I would like to say is, though, on Mr. Kennedy, it sounds like that verbally he told Mr. Conway something different than what he wrote in his proposal here. If I got that correct, he said, you know, you went about the process correctly, you did this, and I can't remember exactly how Mr. Hamilton said that. But then again, you go and you look at his proposal, and then it's kind of contradictory there a little bit to me. And if this is out of line, we don't have, well, I won't ask that question yet. Hang on a second, okay? Here's one thing I was going to ask. The old windows, it sounds like the old windows actually never came up for discussion with the HRB board until after they were gone and the new ones were approved. I mean, not approved, but installed, excuse me. And then the other thing that on application 255, it's a little puzzling to me too, the way it's worded, and I don't know how that happened, but it did say the applicant is proposing both aluminum clad and wood windows. And I'm not sure what that really meant, or because obviously all that was used there was aluminum clad. I'm a little disappointed that and if we did, I missed them. We don't have a copy, or we don't have anything to look at on that plan that's been presented a couple of times where it says things were written on those plans.
Councilman Buckman, it is attached to the, I'm not sure which exhibit that is, but if you, I believe it's, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. I think it's Exhibit F or Exhibit K rather. I believe if you open that and then you scroll down toward like page 16, 17, 18, it's a pretty long.
Okay, I didn't go far enough. I'm sorry then.
I
Okay.
think that where that writing is, I think is on page 17, I want to say. What
It's also
Ms.
on
Newman
Exhibit C as well.
think,
That's
okay.
correct. It's on page 17.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I missed that, Joe. I apologize for that. This was the same presentation, if I'm not mistaken, that you all received, Rashay. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm blowing this thing up. And as we speak here, I'm looking at the front. And where is it? If you don't mind me, where does that say that? I'm trying to see that. Because when I do blow this up, it gets to the point where I cannot read it. I'll agree there.
So in the plans, I believe it states right here. There.
Oh, that the corner?
Yes, that they want to replace all the windows.
Okay. Well, I have to say that is beyond my legibility there. I cannot read that personally. So, let's see if I got anything else here. All right, Rashay, when something's brought up as important as windows here, I mean, obviously we've talked about this, but there is lots of open discussion about this with the HRB. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
And it usually, that discussion would include talking about the quality and how condition the old windows are in.
That's
Would it
correct.
not?
If the original, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And once again, just to help me again, this issue has, to your memory, has never been brought up at a historic review board meeting?
Not the original windows. The board was only discussing the windows for the addition.
Okay. And I see those proposals in there, and it looks like that's the only thing I can see that was asked for was the new addition.
That is correct.
And then I don't want to ask you more questions. I might come back a minute with something else, but I might give somebody else a chance if they want to say something right now.
Thank you, Councilman Buckman. Any other members of the council have comments or questions?
This is David Bounce. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Councilman Dones.
Okay. And I apologize. I don't have a video. I'm actually driving right now and listening to testimony and arguments on both sides. And, up until this point, I think I had made up my mind. But after listening to arguments, there are three things that really stand out to me that make me take notice. Number one being the fact that the contractor held on to the windows after the fact. For what reason? I'm not really sure. He may have had some good reasons to do that, but that's one of the things that stands out to me. Number two is that the applications admitted, I think from both sides of the argument, admit that the applications contain language that suggests that they're only talking about the addition when the replacement windows were mentioned. And I can see where another point of confusion, and I apologize as I'm going by memory from both sides of the arguments here, but the architect's testimony or information that she had added stated that one of the notes referred to mentioned replacement or repair of the windows on the front elevation, but she called them storm windows. Now, me being raised where I was raised, I know what a storm window is. I mean, that's actually a functional outer window shell, not referring to an actual window, which is what a storm window is. So she referred to it as a storm window. So I can see where that would add to some confusion and possibly have given Mr. Conway some license to feel like that they were okay to go ahead and replace those. But I think that may have added to some confusion. So that's, and I'm kind of like Joe. I'm just wanted to say my piece and I'll yield the floor to allow some other comments.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Anyone else have anything they want to ask or add?
I have a few minor questions, I guess. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is, how many board members or how many members were at the hearing?
You mean members of the Historic Review Board?
Yes.
There was all 5 board members present,
Well,
I believe.
But I noticed on, unless I'm missing something, on Mr. Conway's application that the votes were 4-0.
Well, let me double check.
Whereas on like the minutes and 20-04-03, 19-253, the votes were 5-0.
And we may have been missing 1 board member. Which month are you talking about, Coach?
Oh, okay, so I stand corrected. I understand what you're saying now. Okay.
Yeah, we might have been missing 1 board member on one of the meetings.
Okay. And then I guess the real question I have is there some reason why we don't have, we usually get documentation from both sides where we can actually read the materials before we have a hearing. And in this case, I didn't really have anything else. I didn't have anything to read.
Well, I don't want to speak for Mr. Hamilton, but I think that because we had submitted a lot of the documentation relating to the applications and things like that, I don't know that there was anything additional that he wanted to send other than the audio. I know he said he tried to send, which didn't. I don't, Thomas. I mean, I think that's
fair. I sent an email with the audio, but I guess in some exhibits, but they were all covered in what the city had, so I didn't resend it. I guess the audio was too large to email and must not have gotten sent. I can't find where it ever went through. So.
And Coach, I think this is a situation where I don't want to speak for Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Conway, but I think the evidence that they would present to you is pretty much the same. It's more about your interpretation of the significance of the evidence is what it comes down to, rather than that there's some sort of other information that Mr. Hamilton might have presented. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody
I'd like
else?
to go next.
Oh,
Are you
ahead.
finished, Coach Rowe?
I think he muted himself, so I think he is. Go ahead, Councilwoman
Okay.
Hart.
Okay. I just want to say, I know we all agree that this is very unfortunate that it's a misunderstanding and it's come to where it has. Mr. Conway made a good investment in our community. I showed this house before Mr. Conway bought it, and I know what kind of disrepair it was in. So I know what a challenge he faced. Intentionally. I've known him all of my life, and that's just not his character. The one thing I keep going back to, actually 2 things, is I'm still trying to find on the plan where it points out, or where the note was made indicating that all of the windows were going to be replaced. I'm on Exhibit C, and I'm at the blue arrow, I guess at Roche, and I'm looking at the windows where it says replace all east windows and remove existing storm windows. But I assume the east windows would be, well, that is pointing to the old side. So, I mean, if I blow that up, I can read that. And it very clearly points to the windows on the old section, for whatever that all is all worth. And then I go back to, we went through with Demir, and, we didn't allow him to put in new windows, and requested that he rebuild his windows. So it's, I guess I'm still on the fence, because both ways, but it's hard to do anything other than be consistent with these cases. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hart.
Okay.
Anyone else, or
Can I come back?
Councilman Buckman, sure.
All right. Obviously the stone foundation was approved, but was there any, which is on the new part, is there anything at all that was approved on the old part of this house that was specifically approved on the existing part of this house? And I guess the roof, I don't know, I think the roof on all this building is the same. Am I correct?
Address that.
Hey, hey, Joe,
Yes.
something that,
Did we lose him?
something that you and David both asked about, and I know you know the order of the windows. Both of y'all in construction. The front of the building is already built. The back of the building doesn't get framed and doesn't get finished till 2 or 3 months later. That's why front windows was ordered, and then waited a couple months till the back windows was ordered. Because you know the project, the whole thing didn't go on at the same time. The front remodel, and then we put a basement and added the back. So I just wanted to clarify, if you're concerned about it wasn't ordered at the same time, that would be the reason. And I think you and David would understand that, since y'all know back construction.
But I think what he was asking is there any other, and Bill, you may be able to answer this, what was done to the, other than the windows, to the historical part of the home?
One thing that was, I think we approved a black front door, and
Say paint.
talked about the lights. But we also talked about moving.
Can everybody hear Bill? I want to make sure that he's talking. Can everybody hear Bill right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. All right. I just want to make sure.
We talked about the old section during the hearing at that time. I think Wadia and David both discussed both of that at those times. But so we did talk about the old section. But I guess my question is, if you submit an application to do exterior structure alterations and demos, and also do an addition, and then have architectural drawings that are included with the notes that state replace all windows, and an arrow pointing to the old section of the windows and storm windows. And then also, we submitted those in a PDF. If you take a PDF on an iPad, which I believe that's what the board has, then you can expand that out. It looks like what has happened is they copied that on a copier and sent it out to where maybe you couldn't expand it. I don't know. But my question was, if we presented it the way it was, why did it get presented to the HRB differently? Ours was pretty black and white. Wadia is quite a design person, and we had not only what the HRB members had, but we had the full plans there, and we referred to them throughout actually both meetings. And we also met with Rashay prior to both meetings. Wadia and I did personally, and went over each and every one of them. I thought it was very interesting that 30 minutes before the second meeting, I get a phone call, and it's from Rashay on my cell phone. And she said that David Hall wanted to make a presentation. And I said, well, why? She said, well, he just has some comments. And so I said, I had no idea. I said, well, if he's on the agenda, I wouldn't let him speak. But
Mr. Conway, I don't want to rush you, but I do want to give the council some time, because they may have some more questions for you. So
in addition to the front part on the question, if you remember before we got on the side, right?
I did think, Rashay or Mr. Conway, that there was some paint maybe, but maybe I'm mistaken, that maybe painting the structure was one of the things that would have related to both the original and the addition.
That was correct. So paint was approved for the original structure. That was the only thing that was approved for that particular part.
Separately, we just told you what color it was and gave you the Benjamin Moore color code. We didn't say that for the addition or for the oldest, it's for the project, just like doing it for the windows.
Right. And that would have been a separate COA number, of course. So I don't know if any other members of the council who haven't had any comment have anything to add, or if there's any questions from anyone else.
I've got one question.
Councilman Shekels.
Where did David Hall come in at?
So David Hall, apparently, I don't want to speak, but if you've listened to the audio, he appeared at the meeting and
on whose behalf? On whose behalf or whose request?
Mr. Shekels, the meetings are open to the public, and there are people that actually do check our agendas and come to the meetings, especially if there's projects that they really care about. So I believe that Mr. Hall had seen that this was up for discussion at this particular month, and he had decided that he wanted to weigh in. He has a very fond affinity for this house. And I believe he lived there or at some point, but he was very particular and very happy about the house. And so he wanted to present. These are open to the public. Anyone is welcome to talk about it. I believe in a project that Joe had recently done, some people or is working on, people also from North 3rd Street came to present, wondering, having concerns. So they're open for anyone who wants to speak to or for against the project.
Bill, I'll tell you, this is Bill Conway. I was somewhat surprised that he had been provided the whole packet, and he had cut and sliced and reconfigured Richet's drawings, kind of like a little dollhouse, the way he wanted to have it done. And I thought that was kind of very unusual for just a concerned citizen to end up with a whole packet and be able to. So my question was he employed by the HRB? Because that's what it looked like to me.
He was not employed by HRB, Bill.
Well, Mr. Conway, I was just going to tell you, I know that we have had, I can't recall that far back, but there have been other projects where neighbors or neighboring businesses or people who think that something is going to get approved that they didn't get approved have made open records requests for COAs in advance of the meetings. And so I can't tell you that's where he got it. I don't recall that offhand, but that may be, I know that came up recently with another project where a neighbor had requested the COA in advance. So
did he ask for records?
That I don't know, and I'm not sure that we would have, because the materials are provided, for the meeting. So I don't know. I can't tell you because it's been, at that point it would be a year and a half ago, but that has happened certainly where they've requested COAs. So it would be possible. Mr. Councilman Shekels, did you have something else? I'm sorry. Or Thomas, did you have something else?
I was just going to ask the question, did Mr. Hall's presentation have a major impact on the decision that HRB made?
Richet?
I think it totally confused everyone. I would say that would be the primary impact from Bill's perspective. When you go to present a project and a third party shows up, and like imagine us here today and all of a sudden David Hall comes on and wants to be the first one to speak and talks for 20 minutes about this. I mean, it would confuse matters. And so that's what really happened. And that's my belief as to why the meeting went the way it did. And if any confusion occurred, it was really his fault. And he literally showed up he had been on the project. I think there was a lot of discussion about the roof line. He didn't like the elevation. And so he got them to lower the roof line a foot on the addition, which resulted in some of the rooms being, having very low ceilings. So, I mean, he certainly impacted the presentation. He certainly impacted what was approved with respect to the roof line and some of the things like that.
Well, and I would like to state too that with Mr. Hall coming in with the particular thing, what I feel the intention was different because I feel that the intention was to help make the addition possible. So I feel like he was giving advice because of where he had this position and his architectural significance. He's trained in that kind of thing with, you know, to note architectural details extremely well. So I feel like, truthfully to me, and I believe this completely, his opinion was to help make the addition possible so that Mr. Conway could get the addition. He did suggest some changes, but overall it was to see that the project went forward instead of to halt it.
Jay, did you call him and ask him to look at the project, or did he ask for open records?
I can't remember, Bill. I honestly can't remember. I know that he was interested in the project and he came to me to speak about the project, and I can't remember how that was initiated exactly.
Well, his recommendations started off with wanting to lower the roof line 2 feet, and HRB went and lowered it 1 foot. But by doing that, that also lowers the interior sidewalls to about 6 foot. So for a tall person, you know, it's going to be pretty difficult when 3 of those rooms in the addition upstairs are bathrooms. I refer to it as, you know, most beautiful small town in America is Airbnb is specifically designed for midgets, because when you look out the windows, you have to bend your head down to look out. It's kind of a little bit embarrassing. They kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way. But, and the original roof line was below the main structure's roof line to begin with. But that's, we don't want to even get into David Hall.
I have one other thing to ask Rashay, if I could.
Go ahead.
Rashay, all right, when we always do in-kind replacement, do windows would not fall into this category?
No, and that was part of kind of a little bit of what I talked about, because unfortunately in-kind replacements means they have to be made to the exact replicas of what was there. In the meetings of February of 2021, it was noted that the windows, I believe, there were 10 different size windows because they were all custom made for this particular house. So unfortunately, simulated divided light windows are not in-kind replacements. What we required of Demir Sarek of Cafe Primo was that he had to build exact replicas of those windows. He had CAD drawings of those windows, professional design drawings of those windows, of each window, showing that it would, the stop and, you know, basically the jambs, everything was still in place and would be rebuilt because they were beyond repair. And so that is, go ahead.
All right, well, my reason for asking this, and maybe this is not right, but I mean, is it possible, and I don't know this, if the frames were still good or not, and maybe David could answer that, you know, we use replacement windows and replace windows. We kind of, some of our terminology gets kind of mixed around a little bit there, but, you know, could those frames still be replaced and then replace the sashes with replacement windows that do fit that size? I think their reason for wanting to replace them is like everybody else. They just don't want that long-term maintenance that comes around every 2 years. And I think that's probably the reason for this. I could be wrong on that. But I guess my question is, if that frame is saved, and then most seals have to be replaced anyway, because they almost always rot when they sit there with that kind of abuse over the years. So would that work, you know, and do
Joe, we're actually we're the frame, we are not requesting the frame be redone. We're actually just asking that the original sashes be put back. The frame, the joints, everything else with those windows we're not requesting that those be redone whatsoever. We're literally just requesting the original sashes go back. That's it.
Well, that's not the question I asked though. Yeah, but in kind, what if so, I mean, what if some of those could not be replaced? What if they're so bad that you just can't possibly replace them? I mean, it's just not feasible to replace them. How about that?
The sashes, you mean?
Yes. And on that west side, I'm sure they're a lot more abused than they are on that front side.
Yeah. So there's 13 sashes that were reviewed by Mr. Kennedy, and only 10 would need to be put back. So there's actually 3 separate sashes to use separate parts for if they were so deteriorated. But the condition as quoted by Mr. Kennedy is that they are in fair condition and can easily be restored. So it would be different if the muttons were missing, but you do have 3 separate sashes in which to use parts for, extra ones.
So theoretically, if they could do that, then some of them still might have to be replaced with in-kind or similar style window. Yes or no?
No, I don't think, according to Mr. Kennedy's report, from what I can gather with it, I think it just needs to be reglazed. And some of the muttons, if it had to be a portion of the mutton that may need to be, I think one was busted, one mutton was busted or something on a window or a sash. If that needed to be done, there's enough parts that are there to be able to repair that one particular window, but most of them are in pretty good shape.
Rashay, can I ask this question? And this came up, I think, with Mr. Sarik's hearing, and I know this came up before the HRB back in February when this was there. And one of the challenges, and I think Mr. Hamilton kind of presented about this a little bit too, one of the challenges with historic windows is sometimes finding someone to work on them. You know, and I know Mr. Black seems to be sort of like the gold standard for windows. But of course, we all know, I know this was discussed, you know, I couldn't get him to come to my house for the next 5 years or something, right? You know, he's booked very far out. I know, you know, Mr. Sarik went out of town. Do you have a sense of how easy it is to find a contractor, you know, that can do this kind of work?
Patrick Kennedy has a list of carpenters and restorationists that can work on particular projects such as this, and so does the Kentucky Heritage Council. They have a list of contractors that are available that can do the restoration work if needed. I don't know exactly how easy right now, of course, but there are a list of people that are capable of doing the work. Not Mr. Black, of course. He is, he's the piece de resistance of, you know, kind of getting, you know, your windows repaired. He's excellent and does a great job, but he is booked very far out.
Okay. Yes.
At least 4 years.
Yeah, I knew it was several years. So,
he's the
only.
only.
I got a quick question. I mean, I think about that though. I mean, so if you're restoring a historic property, you have to have knowledge of the Kentucky, you know, historic preservation, or, you know, that's just, you know, I think really it's important to remember that Bill is a citizen, and, you know, he is doing, you know, the people that are supposed to be the experts are the HRB, not the applicants. And the applicants do their best to try to comply with what are very difficult rules. And I'm in the HRB, and I think it's great because it keeps everything looking good. But when I apply, I would assume if it was me, my application is going to be considered. And I think that is especially true for people who don't do this every day, who don't look at applications. And I think that's important for us to remember. You know, I think Mr. Jones stated, I think Mr. Jones is mistaken in a couple of his statements as far as what Mr. Cook said and what was represented. I think maybe he's reading a little something into it that wasn't intended by Mr. Cook. But all that considered, you know, Bill has provided plans that were, you know, more comprehensive than, I won't say all, but the majority of plans that are submitted. And I know a lot of you, and the HRB does a lot of good things, but also some of the things that can get considered on the February 2021 meeting. Before Bill got to go, there was about a 45-minute discussion as to whether the new brewery could put an outdoor trash can. And, you know, it makes it very difficult for the applicant to make sure they've got their whole project. So, you know, Bill's presentation was over an hour, I believe, in January 2020. In 2021, I think the entire hearing went something like 3 hours. And so I just think it's expecting too much to require us to review every, you know, to make, when you're doing a huge project, I think it's reasonable for a citizen that does not do this for a living to say, I submitted plans, I got approval of my plans, and I'm going to proceed with them. And, you know, the windows were not on his radar. I mean, they were a small part of a much larger project. And so I think the thought process that like, well, they didn't mention the windows specifically, they didn't go into detail about the windows is a little misguided because, you know, they were looking at it from the project. And, you know, if I'm presenting a project and I don't get questions from the review board about a particular aspect of it, then how am I to know to address it? And I think that's the key thing here. And I think that's what is important to consider. And I need to close this window because I look ridiculous with this light. But,
well, Thomas, I want to get to Councilman Hibbs because I know and we don't want to have a 3-hour meeting here if we can avoid that either. So, Councilman Hibbs, did you have a comment or a question? I know you did just a second ago.
Just a quick one, Audrey, if you wouldn't mind. And, you know, first off, I want to echo everyone else's sentiments towards Mr. Conway. Thank you for taking on this project. It was a house that sorely needed a lot of work, and thank you for trying to beautify downtown as much as possible. In the interest of hearing like both sides of the arguments completely, I really wanted to know what Mr. Hamilton, you wanted us to hear in that audio clip that you sent, because it did not go through. Can you tell us kind of what you wanted us to hear out of that clip?
Briefly, it was just basically the entire conversation of the project. Well, number one, if you listen, I think it's starting about an hour and 19 minutes into the January 2020 audio, that's when they start talking about the windows. And of course you can listen to the rest of it, but I think that you can hear that they reference new windows, and the implication to me is that if you're talking about new windows in a certain part and then windows generally later on, that they were discussing the old historic windows, or at least that Bill and Wadia and Dave thought that that's what they were discussing. So I think if you listen, starting at about an hour and 19 minutes in, if I recall correctly, that I wanted just to listen specifically to that portion. And that's what I was trying to get at.
And Councilman Hibbs, that was in your materials as Exhibit P, I believe. Yes. You know, and I don't know, you may be about right, Thomas, because I think that there's a couple of clips there afterwards where they're still talking about the windows at about an hour and 21 minutes or so. So I would assume the discussion started somewhere around the mark you said.
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I ask Rashay a question, please?
Go right ahead.
Okay, as I've been listening to all of this, I've gone back to the original plan, and I know that HRB was presented it on paper, so they didn't have the ability to enlarge it like we have today on our iPads.
We're losing Betty.
You couldn't read the note. Do you think they're able to see arrows? Because the arrows are pointing to the windows on the older portion. So there's a note there, maybe that if they saw the arrow, they should have tried to read the note. I don't know.
So they were presented to them, Ms. Hart, they did have iPads, but whatever version that was attached that was scanned, when they zoomed in, they couldn't read that. And that was noted in the minutes in February of 2021. Our chairman stated that she zoomed in and then proceeded to turn the iPad around and state we could not read this. And so so for some reason.
Were the arrows legible is what I'm asking. Were the arrows legible? Because if you look at the arrow, then you know that there's a note there referring to those windows.
Betty, I think it's important to remember that I think the version that was provided to HRB could have been expanded and legible because it was in a PDF. Now, what the HRB may have printed off and scanned as part of the application, that may have been the issue. Either way, Bill had full-size plans there on the day of that actual hearing in January, so they should have been able to review it then. But our position is that it shouldn't prejudice Bill. Bill shouldn't be negatively impacted by the HRB's not being able to review the plans that they were provided. They should have requested additional plans, in our opinion.
Councilwoman Hart, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Questions?
All right, my final comment. Thomas, you made this reference. I know firsthand how difficult it is when you try to present a project of this magnitude and include every detail. And our process requires all these details up front. And although we might not totally agree with that process, but this is what we have now. And how do we get around that? And then, and I think the reason that everybody wants to be in this historic district and why property values up and all that is because of our passion to preserve and protect these areas. And that's our rules now. And I just, that's my piece. And I think maybe in this case right here, right now, I think, and I hope that's the case, that they just got kind of caught up in trying to move forward and keep things going, and might have made a wrong decision and putting the windows in without getting them approved.
So Joe, can I make a comment?
Sure.
When I said that we submitted the plans and the application, I said, well, how come that what we wrote up wasn't presented to the board, or it was presented differently? Because the HRB department, and I'm not sure if it was Roche or she had a couple of interns there, I think in December about this time, who put the 10 or 12 different COAs together. But I asked Roche that, and she and I and Audrey were on a Zoom meeting, and she stated that it was a misunderstanding.
And Mr. Conway, do you mean when you say what you wrote up, do you mean the note on the plan wasn't noted, or is there some other document you're talking about that would have been presented?
No, I'm not talking about anything that was presented. I'm just talking about a conversation that you and Roche and I had about why it was presented to the board differently than what we submitted. And Roche said it was a misunderstanding.
I also stated, Bill, I stated that during the February 2021 meeting that I didn't believe I had misrepresented anything at that point. And so.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Okay. So what I was wondering is if you remember saying that you just thought it was addition, so that's how you wrote it up for the entire application. You didn't understand or see the comments in the font on the windows. And that you asked the board members, did you all read all the information on this? And they said they did, they thought they did. It was small and you had to zoom in on it. So you've got a tough job, and I've told numerous people that you need a lot of help in your department from a staffing standpoint. And I'm not sure, with all the applications that I've been to several of your all's meetings now, and there is a lot going on. And for you to get everything presented the way I guess it was given to you, I'm sure it's difficult at times. We, when we got the approval, we went and ordered the windows, and that's an expense. Yeah. And then when you said put the stop work order, when we tried to see what would it cost to flip those out, it was $35,000 to $40,000 in 4 years. And Eddie Black wasn't the only person we talked to, but he's the only one that would actually do anything in writing. And that was an estimate. He would not make it a bid, because he said, things, you always spend more money on it, more time on it than you think. So I think we're being kind of chastised when we presented everything up front. And then the way the approval read, it was approved an addition and approved new windows. And that we went from there.
Okay. Any other members of the council, any further comments, or are we ready to close discussion on this and testimony on this hearing?
Maybe this is not the right place, but is there any way that where we are now, that we can make both parties happy? How are we going to do that? I thought a while ago, I thought I was bringing up something a while ago that might work a little, but obviously it didn't sound like that was the best idea to Roche. you know, I just, it kills me to be in this position here. Not me personally, but where we are with this situation. It's got
So
two totally
Joe,
different. Yes.
yeah, and that's where the frames, the joints, you know, all of the materials of the windows, the only thing that we're requesting is the sashes. So that was, I feel the main component of what we were trying to salvage was because, so we're not trying to salvage the original frames. We're not trying to salvage the original joints, not the jambs. We're literally just trying to salvage the sashes. And
So you're saying they could rebuild that entire window around as long as they put the old sashes back in?
And
yes.
Joe,
Huh? No, who's that speaking?
says we can't, he wants to comment on the sashes real briefly.
The grids, the wooden grids on the sashes from the outside.
You're getting a lot of feedback, Dave. Dave, I didn't hear
So they're deteriorated all the way up. The sashes.
Mr. Cook, we kind of lost. Mr. Cook, we lost you there for a minute. So you said something about the grid, which I think you mean is the mutton, and then we lost you. You were cutting out. So can you start that thought over for us?
Yes. Okay. The sashes she's talking about, the wooden grids of the muttons, they rot from the outside, and they're deteriorated to the point that the glass is almost falling out. And I've heard that you've had an issue with that on Main Street, some glass falling out because of that reason. So these sashes are in that bad a shape. So most sashes, Joe, I was talking to you because I think you was asking a question, but most sashes do rot from the outside because of the weather. And so it is very hard to just use a sash, an old sash. You come down to my house one time and look, see if you can find some old ones to fix some old windows that you had for yourself. But and then also Mr. Kennedy, I let him in last week to look at those windows, and I asked him about fixing them. And I said, will they be operational? He said, no, I didn't say that. He said, I can just fix them. I can't necessarily make them operational. What he was basically trying to say.
Well, yes, and according to Mr. Kennedy, in page 2, it states at the very top, the 150-year-old sashes are in fair condition and easily restorable. So I just believe we have basically two separate views on this matter.
So to your point, Councilman Buckman, I guess, you know, I mean, I don't want to curtail discussion if there's further discussion, but, you know, the way I sort of see the council, I suppose, can approve the, override the Historic Review Board's decision, which you all are entitled to make your own decision based on the evidence you've heard here and what was presented before. You could approve it and say he can keep the windows as installed. You could deny it and say you have to put the historic windows back as they were. If a member of the council has a compromise somewhere in between that they can craft, certainly they could make a motion to that effect as well. If there's further discussion, we can take that, but if not, we can close discussion, I guess, and see if there's anyone who has a motion they'd like to make. And I don't want to propose what those, but you could approve the application with certain conditions, if you have some idea, Councilman Buckman, of what those might be.
Audrey, to Councilman Buckman's proposal, and excuse my ignorance if this is not feasible, please let me know. Can you combine the old sashes with the new windows somehow to satisfy both parties?
Let me say, Rashay's shaking her head no, but I don't know, sort of from a contractor's, I don't know, if that can be done. I think that's what Rashay's talking about, and I don't know enough about, I know more about historic windows now than I ever thought I would.
Sure, maybe that's a Rashay question. Sorry about that, but I was trying to come up with a compromise for both parties there.
As far as for me, Councilman Hibbs, no, because we are allowing the frames to be rebuilt. They're already basically in there. We've allowed for the jambs, we've allowed for the joints, we've allowed for everything else to be rebuilt. We are just asking for the sashes. to be put back.
But I
So-
think his.
Oh, and he's asking, can we combine them? Right. So you
Yes.
have true divided lights versus simulated divided lights. It won't look correct at all. And we've never allowed that kind of compromise in the historic district. So again, referring back to Demir, we've had to have him replicate that exactly. So there was no combination that was left for him to do something to that effect. So combining simulated divided light windows with true divided light windows, and that means like single panes of glass versus double pane windows that have a fake grid in between with an exterior and interior mutton as simulated divided lights. Allowing that combination, I don't feel would be appropriate for the home.
Okay, thank you.
So Rashay, if they, and I'll shut up after that, I promise. If they agree to have those windows made exactly like the windows they're called rotted, they still would not be approved?
Yes, so if they were to, but the problem is that the sashes that are in there are not in kind. So these are
I know that.
simulated.
I understand. I do. Yeah.
So if they were to make another window, you're stating, if they were to rebuild another window and have it made exactly like what was there, yes, if they were deteriorated beyond repair, but we have an account stating that the original windows are salvageable. So that's unfortunately, that's kind of the issue that we're running against, is we have a window expert that stated that the windows are not beyond repair at this point. Demir's were considered beyond repair.
If you'd asked me to put a new window in or a replacement window in, I'd have been happy to have done that. I mean, we've waited it's over a year now at a standstill because of what's going on.
So Councilman Buckman, are you, I don't know if you have a thought that you're moving toward, or
no. I mean, that's what I mean, my feeling was earlier, just to reclaim some of the old wood. You know, evidently the frame's not that important, but the sash is. So I was hoping to be able to take some of the old and add maybe the new back, you know, just to appease maybe everybody here. But it doesn't sound like the frame is that important. But, you know, I'm going to bet they're still in good shape. I mean, very seldom you see those rotted away completely. That just doesn't happen. But that was kind of where I was hoping, you know, maybe it could be some consideration, but that's okay. That's really, that was my idea. And you know, that would be a total overhaul again for Mr. Conway, because you can't use what's there. There's no question about that. But you know, we're kind of stuck out there right now. So I was just trying to figure out a way that it could possibly work. And it's hard. It's very difficult to find someone to make those windows, to make that type of window. You can look forever. They're very difficult to find somebody that'll even touch that window today. Make them new. But the repair people, they're as hard to come by as you know, who has 3 years to wait to repair a window? I don't know how you go about doing that. But so that was my suggestion. But
my question to Audrey and Rashay was, when does an old window become a new window? When you do the repairs, where's the axis cross to where the repairs ends up making it a new window versus an old one?
I would defer that to someone who's an expert on windows, and that is certainly not me.
But so, I mean, if you're going to spend $3,000 or $4,000 to fix a window, when you at the end of the fix, is it an old window or is it a new window?
Right. Well, and so I don't want to curtail discussion, but if we don't have more discussion, then I would, I guess, invite any member of the council to make a motion, you know, to approve the application as presented, to deny the application, to approve the application with some sort of conditions you would add to the application, if there's any member of the council that has a motion they would like to make.
I'll be brave.
I'll say, don't all jump at once.
I'll be brave. And I would just want to preface it by saying, I certainly appreciate all of the work of the Historic Review Board. I can't imagine how difficult their job is. With that being said, and I'm basing my motion on the original plan where the notes and the arrow pointed to the window and indicating that the windows on the old position, the old part of the building would be replaced. I make a motion that we allow Mr. Conway to keep the windows. And I'm open to any amendments on that.
Well, and so just to be clear, Councilwoman Hart, your motion is to approve Mr. Conway's amended application requesting to keep the windows as currently installed on the home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have a
Thank you.
second? Do we have a second to Councilwoman Hart's motion?
I'll second it. I'll second it, Audrey.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Did you get my second, Audrey?
I did. Yes, I did, Councilman Shekels. I don't know if there's any further discussion before we call for a vote.
Audrey, I don't know if this is appropriate or not either. There seems to be a lot of confusion from all of us, kind of conflicting on where I guess our decision lies. Would it be appropriate to table this and have further discussion on Joe's suggestion about trying to come up with a compromise that would be easier on everybody's pocketbooks at that point?
Well, that's kind of why we're here. Is it's before you all to make a decision on that. We've taken testimony here today. I don't know that anyone has I don't know that anyone has some other compromise to suggest, right? You've heard Ms. Jennings say that it's important to preserve the sashes, and there's some evidence in the record reflecting how that could be done. Mr. Kennedy, I think, detailed and pretty step by step about how he would do that and the cost of that. Obviously Mr. Conway's position, I don't want to speak for Thomas and Mr. Conway, but their position is that they've installed these windows and they're requesting to keep them as installed. So, to the extent that we could put some kind of other conditions on an approval of the windows, I don't know if Mr. Conway or Mr. Hamilton has some kind of suggestion. We have a motion and a second on the floor that we can vote on.
Yeah, we'll donate the windows to the city, and the city can use them in its next project. The old windows, if you want. No, what? Being facetious, but yeah, I don't see how we can really, I think our position is we tried for months and months and months to reach a compromise position, and we just we would prefer a decision if the council can reach one. Of course, council's discretion, whatever they'd like to do.
So, I think, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have a motion on the floor, I think we can take a vote. Is that fair to say, Mr. Clerk? Okay. So I guess, and I don't know if we should take it by voice vote since it gets or by individual vote, since it gets kind of confusing when we're all on here, but I guess we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor that's been seconded, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Hart?
Aye.
Councilman Shekels?
Nay.
Okay.
This is
Well, I guess,
Councilman Dones.
thank you. All opposed, I guess, we've got Councilman Dones.
Nay. Coach Rowe.
Right.
Audrey, this is Councilman Hibbs. I agree there's a lot of things that are really hard to decipher in this, but just judging purely on the fact that we have to be consistent in our judgments in the HRB with the windows, I'm going to have to vote nay as well.
Okay. Councilman Buckman?
I think you're on mute, Joe.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I voted no. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm
sorry. Okay.
Um,
So
Yep.
the motion, what now? So the motion so just procedurally, the motion to allow Mr. Conway to keep the windows, I believe if I counted right, failed 4-2. So do I have a motion, another motion to be proposed.
Audrey, I'll try to do this, okay? I would like to make a motion that, once again, that Mr. Conway attempts to work with the HRB board to use as much of those windows that are feasible and be able to replace the window sashes that are beyond repair. That's my motion.
So just so I'm clear, so you're making a motion that Mr. Conway be required to, I guess, work with the preservation coordinator to restore and return to the home, I guess, the historic sashes to the extent that they can be repaired. Am I understanding that?
Repaired or
I've got a
replaced
question.
with equipment.
How are you going to replace something that's beyond repair? That's the question I need to ask. With that motion, how are you going to make a motion to repair something that is beyond repair?
Well, I guess what I mean by that is they would have to have a window made to those specifications that they can't repair that window, Bill.
Well, maybe that's what you meant to say, but the way it came out was you want to repair something that's beyond repair. It didn't make sense to me. So
well, I said the ones that can be repaired, but the ones that are beyond repair, to allow them to have new sashes made.
Okay.
I don't know where else to go with this.
Okay.
Well, that's a little more clear. That's a little more clear when you said that, but the way it came out the first time, it didn't sound like that.
Okay.
Well, I'm not trying to be a lawyer here. I'm far from it. So somebody's got to help me a little bit.
So let me, and I'm not a window.
I would second that motion.
Okay.
Okay.
And we've got a second from Coach Rowe. All in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
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 And Hibbs. All opposed.
I'm sorry, Audrey. I got confused. Can you repeat the motion?
So the motion on the floor, let me make sure I'm stating it correctly, from Councilman Buckman is that his request is that we would deny the request to keep the windows that are installed and would require Mr. Conway to work with the preservation coordinator to restore those sashes that can be restored, and those that are beyond repair would be replaced with something that was to the same specifications as the window, the historic window. Is that fair? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that's really the only other option since the other motion failed, correct?
Yeah, I guess that's where we are. So, so any opposed to the motion?
So I will.
We kind of lost you, Councilwoman Hart. You cut out on us.
Guys,
Audrey, I'd vote aye on that motion because a decision has to be made one way or the other tonight. So
okay.
It's time to do something.
Okay.
Instead of carrying this on and on and on.
Gary, did you get these votes, Gary or Lisa? Hopefully.
I'm still uncertain about Betty's.
She kind of cut out on us.
I apologize. I am voting in favor of the motion since it's the only other alternative.
Okay.
Guys, I think Mr. Cook does have a question with respect to what's being voted on. Dave, do you mind just asking?
Yeah, y'all just voted on repairing a window or having one built spec just like it. What if that's impossible to do? And what if we're back to the 4 years getting it done and impossible to fix those windows back to the specs that I guess that y'all require? In addition, if you try to fix an old window, you still got an old window. Those windows are over 200 years old. Paint and putty just don't go but so far. So I do have a question. What if it's impossible, if you're gonna vote on that and it's impossible to get that done?
Well, I suppose, I guess my answer, I don't want to, I don't know any other solution other than I suppose Mr. Conway has a right to appeal this back to circuit court and take it back there. Beyond that, I can't tell you about the feasibility other than that I grew up in a house with 240-year-old windows or 30-year-old windows that they've been restored a couple times. So it's possible. Whether or not it's feasible in this case, I can't tell you. So, but that's, that's something I suppose that we can, after we conclude this meeting, that's something that Mr. Conway can discuss with Ms. Jennings and see what we can figure out about the specific windows. And if there's a timeline that's feasible, if there's not, then, the court can address that further if that's what Mr. Conway chooses. I guess we've taken a vote on my dogs are all barking. I don't know why. We've taken a vote on the motion, so I don't know if there's any further business at this meeting. So if not, I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn the hearing.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.